Prince Andrew will no longer be called a prince. He has been officially stripped of all his titles rather than voluntarily giving them up, and he will be moving out of Royal Lodge. We will go through what it all means and look at the Buckingham Palace statement that was issued on Thursday night, word by word.
In this video, I'm going to reveal the shocking truth about how King Charles just made the toughest decision of his reign, stripping his own brother of everything he once held dear. We'll uncover the real story behind Prince Andrew's fall from grace, the secrets that led to his exile, and what this means for the future of the British royal family. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this moment will be remembered for generations. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because royal drama like this doesn't come around every day, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The king just did something nobody thought he would ever do. He took away everything from his own brother, every title, every honor, every bit of royal privilege. Prince Andrew, who once walked the halls of Windsor Castle like he owned them, has been kicked out. No more fancy royal titles, no more living in that massive 30-room mansion. From now on, he's just Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, an ordinary citizen carrying the weight of his past mistakes and facing the anger of a nation that's had enough. For years, that huge house called Royal Lodge was Andrew's safe place. Hidden deep in Windsor Great Park, it was his castle, his fortress. It was like a giant middle finger to everyone who criticized him. A reminder that no matter what the newspapers said, he was still royal. But those days are over. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that King Charles served him official papers, forcing him to give up his home. The same place that once hosted royal dinners and fancy parties will soon be emptied out by order of the crown. People close to the king say this is his way of punishing Andrew. Quiet, calculated, and final. Charles gave his brother multiple chances to step away with dignity. Andrew ignored every single one. So what finally pushed the king over the edge? Was it years of scandals piling up, or was there one specific moment that made him say, "Enough is enough"? Stay with me because the answer might surprise you. The breaking point came after King Charles met with President Volodymyr Zelensky at Windsor Castle. After all the cameras left and the diplomats went home, Charles went back to his office and signed the documents that would end Andrew's royal life forever. The timing wasn't random. While Charles was showing strength and leadership on the world stage, he was also showing that same strength at home. For the first time in a very long time, a British monarch turned his judgment on his own family member. The message is brutal, but crystal clear. The royal family only forgives scandals once. And now the whole country is watching with a mixture of shock and satisfaction as Andrew packs his bags. But here's what everyone's really wondering. If this is how Charles treats his own brother, what does that mean for the other royals who are walking on thin ice? Could Harry and Meghan be next on the chopping block? To really understand how Prince Andrew ended up in this mess, we need to go back several years through all the scandals, the denials, and the slow breakdown of royal patience. This disaster didn't happen overnight. The seeds were planted long before Charles signed those final papers. For decades, Andrew was Queen Elizabeth's favorite son. He was confident, decorated as a war hero, and felt entitled to everything. But then came that disastrous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview, where he tried to defend himself against allegations of sexual misconduct linked to Jeffrey Epstein. His defense was so tone-deaf, so out of touch, that it backfired spectacularly. He claimed he couldn't sweat because of a medical condition from the Falklands War. He showed no remorse, no empathy for victims. What should have been damage control turned into a national embarrassment. From that moment on, Andrew's reputation started rotting from the inside out. When Queen Elizabeth died in 2022, she took Andrew's last shield with her. King Charles didn't just inherit a crown, he inherited a family crisis. The new era demanded accountability, transparency, and distance from scandal. Andrew represented everything the monarchy desperately needed to leave behind. By early 2023, quiet conversations inside the palace turned into ultimatums. Charles offered Andrew a way out: keep a low profile, do quiet charity work, stay out of the spotlight. Andrew refused. He actually believed that if he just waited long enough, people would forget. He thought time would wash away his sins, but the world didn't forget. And neither did the victims. So why did Andrew think he was untouchable? What made him believe the rules didn't apply to him? Then came the money problems. His lavish home, Royal Lodge became a symbol of everything wrong with the royal family. While regular British citizens were struggling through a cost of living crisis, pinching pennies just to pay their bills, Andrew was living rent-free in a 30-room mansion. He had secured a 75-year lease decades ago for something called a peppercorn rent, which basically means almost nothing. Members of Parliament started asking tough questions. Even people who usually supported the royals began turning against him. By the summer of 2025, internal discussions had reached a boiling point. On October 17th, Andrew released a statement saying he would voluntarily stop using his royal titles. For a brief moment, it looked like maybe there would be peace. But people inside the palace knew better. The king didn't want a polite surrender. He wanted Andrew completely removed. This decision wasn't just about Andrew. It was about cleaning up the entire brand of the monarchy. A modern king couldn't afford to let his brother walk around as a living, breathing reminder of disgrace and scandal. But what about the rest of the family? How did they react when they realized Charles was serious about cutting Andrew off? The first cracks in the family started showing long before the cameras caught them. In early autumn, the whispers around Windsor grew louder and more insistent. Staff members who used to call him His Royal Highness were suddenly instructed to call him Mr. Andrew. These small, humiliating changes hinted that a decision had already been made behind closed doors. Royal aides called it the quiet phase, but to people who saw it up close, it felt more like the calm before a storm. Andrew's public appearances had been rare since 2020, but by mid-2025, they were practically non-existent. Every time he tried to show his face, at a charity event, a church service, even just a walk with his daughters, the backlash came back stronger than ever. Headlines dug up the same old accusations, printed the same old photos of him with Jeffrey Epstein in Central Park. The scandal refused to die. It was like a zombie that just kept coming back, no matter how many times they tried to bury it. Inside the royal family, the tension had become toxic. Charles, bound by his role as king, tried to balance being merciful with being a strong leader. Camilla urged him to be careful, worried about looking vengeful to the public. But William, now the Prince of Wales, was far less forgiving. To him, Andrew's continued presence at Royal Lodge was a daily insult to the institution they were all trying to save. Even the normally diplomatic courtiers began to agree. "It's not personal," one said quietly. "It's survival." Meanwhile, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were caught in the middle. Torn between loyalty to their father and painful awareness that their own titles were being whispered about in the corridors of power. If they take Dad's title, will we be next? Eugenie reportedly asked a family friend. The answer was no, at least not yet. Both sisters had carefully avoided scandal, dedicating themselves to charity work and motherhood. But the fear lingered like a dark cloud, because when the monarchy starts cutting branches, no one feels completely safe. What would you do if you were in their position, watching your father lose everything while worrying about your own future? At Royal Lodge, Andrew tried to project calm and confidence. Friends described him as defiant, but increasingly detached from reality. He told people close to him that the king wouldn't dare make it official, not after everything they'd been through together, not after losing their mother. But those same friends later admitted he'd grown paranoid. Curtains were drawn earlier each day. Security details were doubled. One insider claimed he even ordered staff to photograph every vehicle that drove past the gate, convinced he was being watched. Then the political heat turned up even more. Members of Parliament began pressing the Crown Estate about Andrew's lease. How could a disgraced duke still live in a multi-million-pound property for basically no rent while taxpayers were funding palace renovations? The term peppercorn rent, once just a boring legal technicality, became a punchline on nightly talk shows. The king's advisors could no longer ignore it. Public anger is contagious, one said. If it sticks to Andrew, it stains the throne. The turning point arrived quietly on October 24th, when King Charles met President Volodymyr Zelensky at Windsor Castle. The photos looked perfect. A strong monarch standing shoulder to shoulder with a wartime leader, projecting unity and duty to the world. But behind the scenes, aides noticed a visible shift in the king's mood. After the cameras left and everyone went home, Charles lingered in his study longer than usual, reading through folders marked Royal Lodge Lease Review. That evening, one of his private secretaries was told to finalize the documentation. Within days, preparations were underway. Legal teams from both Buckingham Palace and the Crown Estate worked together to coordinate the terms. Technically, it wasn't called an eviction. The documents framed it as a formal surrender, but everyone understood what it really meant. The last thread connecting Andrew to royal privilege was about to be cut. Think about it. When was the last time you saw a family publicly turn on one of their own like this? What does that tell us about how serious the situation really is? Word of the decision spread in hushed whispers through Windsor. Some staff members actually cried, not because they were loyal to Andrew, but because they couldn't believe it was really happening. "It's really happening," one footman whispered to another. "He's losing everything." Others felt relief, even satisfaction. "This is overdue," said one. "It's what the Queen would have done if she'd lived long enough to see how bad things got." But outside the gates, the story hadn't broken yet. The palace was determined to control the narrative completely. Only a handful of insiders knew the exact date the official order would be served. Among them was Andrew's own security chief, who quietly scheduled additional guards for the morning of October 30th. That night, Andrew ate dinner alone. The chandeliers of Royal Lodge glowed dimly, casting shadows on the polished table where royal banquets had once been held. On the wall hung portraits of him in his naval uniform, reminders of honor that was now gone forever. Somewhere deep down, he must have known the end was coming. And yet, even in those final hours before everything fell apart, he refused to believe that his own brother would be the one to deliver the final blow. But the papers were already sitting on the king's desk. The ink was ready, the signature was inevitable, and the crown was prepared to cut one of its own. What would it feel like to know your own family is about to publicly disown you? Behind the golden walls of Buckingham Palace, the machinery of royal justice was grinding into motion. The king's decision to strip Andrew of his titles hadn't come overnight. It had been a slow, agonizing process of late-night meetings, political consultations, and moral debates that had split even the royal household down the middle. Advisors close to Charles say the real conversation began after his meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky at Windsor on October 24th. The visit was supposed to be a show of unity and diplomacy, Britain standing strong with Ukraine in a time of war. But when the cameras shut off, the king reportedly turned to Camilla and said quietly, "We cannot project honor abroad while corruption lives under our own roof." Those words, one aide said, sealed Andrew's fate more surely than any legal document ever could. For days after that, the palace worked in almost total secrecy. Legal teams reviewed Andrew's 75-year lease on Royal Lodge, examining every single clause, every footnote, looking for the right way to do this. The term surrender was chosen very deliberately, said one senior source. It sounds diplomatic, but in royal language, it means exile. At the same time, the king's private secretary worked with the Crown Estate to make sure the move appeared lawful and proper, not personal or vindictive. Optics mattered tremendously. This had to look like duty, not revenge. Meanwhile, Camilla handled the emotional side of things. She knew how brutal this would appear to the world. Some people within the family wanted Andrew quietly retired to the countryside, out of sight but not completely humiliated. Others demanded a public reckoning, a clear message that actions have consequences. William reportedly called the situation a necessary purge. Harry, from his home in California, remained silent, though sources close to him said he watched events unfold with grim fascination. It wasn't lost on him that the same institution capable of cutting off his uncle could one day come for him too. How would you feel knowing your entire family is discussing whether to publicly destroy you? The sisters, Beatrice and Eugenie, were torn apart emotionally. They visited their father at Royal Lodge just days before the announcement. The air was tense, the rooms already half-packed. According to one family friend, Andrew reassured them, "This is temporary. The king is just protecting himself politically." But deep down, both daughters understood the gravity of the situation. In modern Britain, scandal has no shelf life, no expiration date. Even royal blood can curdle in the harsh court of public opinion. Outside the palace, the mood among regular British people was changing dramatically. For years, they had demanded accountability. The Jeffrey Epstein connection still haunted Andrew like a ghost that refused to leave. Each time a victim spoke out publicly, sympathy for the Duke shrank even further. By late October, polls showed that more than 75% of British citizens supported removing Andrew's titles altogether. The monarchy, in their eyes, couldn't claim moral authority while harboring a man so deeply tainted by scandal, even if he denied every single allegation. Can you imagine being so unpopular that 3 out of 4 people in your country want you stripped of your status? On the evening of October 27th, the king gathered his most senior advisors at Clarence House for one final meeting. "We can delay no longer," he reportedly said with finality. The monarchy must breathe clean air again. By the end of that meeting, the final wording of the statement was approved and ready to go. His Majesty has initiated a formal process to remove the styles, titles, and honors of Prince Andrew. He will henceforth be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. When the palace communications team received the text, one staffer was seen taking a deep breath before hitting send to the national press pool. "It felt historic," she later admitted. "We knew Britain was about to witness something it hadn't seen since Edward VIII, a royal stripped by his own blood." At Royal Lodge, Andrew could sense the walls closing in around him. He spent hours pacing the halls, replaying old memories in his mind. Garden parties, military parades, naval ceremonies. The property that once symbolized ultimate privilege now felt like a prison of ghosts and regrets. Neighbors reported seeing removal trucks parked discreetly at the back gate days before the official notice arrived. Even the gardeners had stopped trimming the hedges, as if they already knew the house would soon be empty. Then came a detail that stunned even seasoned royal insiders. Andrew's relocation would be to the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, the same property where his late father, Prince Philip, spent his final years. Sources hinted that he might move into Wood Farm, a modest house compared to the grandeur he was losing. Some called it poetic justice, others called it deliberate punishment. What message do you think the king was sending by choosing that specific location? And that's where the story deepens beyond just the royal bubble. Because while many British people applauded the king's firmness and decisiveness, others questioned whether this was the beginning of a much broader cleansing of the royal ranks. If Andrew's disgrace led to complete exile, what about others whose reputations were teetering on the edge of scandal? Would the same harsh rules apply to Harry and Meghan, who had defied the crown for fame and fortune in America? Or Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife, who still uses her Duchess title despite controversy, and her own health battles? It's a question dividing royal watchers around the entire world, and one that even palace aides dodge and deflect when asked directly. And now I want to hear from you. What city or country are you watching this royal drama unfold from? Do you believe King Charles made the right call? Or has the monarchy gone way too far in punishing one of its own? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this story doesn't end here. And your perspective helps shape how history will remember this moment. As Britain watches Andrew pack his last suitcase at Royal Lodge, the question echoing through every corridor of the monarchy is exactly the same everywhere. If mercy is completely gone from the crown, who's going to be next to lose their place in the royal line? The morning of October 30th arrived with an eerie, uncomfortable stillness hanging over Windsor. The lawns around Royal Lodge, usually perfectly manicured, were scattered with fallen autumn leaves. Security cars lined the driveway, engines idling, waiting. Inside the house, staff spoke only in whispers. They had all received the same briefing at dawn. By order of His Majesty, the Duke of York is to vacate the property. Address him as Mr. Mountbatten Windsor. Shortly after 8 a.m., a sealed envelope arrived at the front gate, delivered by a royal courier under full police escort. It contained 2 letters, one from Buckingham Palace, the other from the Crown Estate. Together, they formed the official notice that ended an entire chapter of royal history. The wording was clinical and cold. The lease on Royal Lodge is hereby surrendered. All remaining possessions are to be removed within 7 days. Andrew stood at the window, pale and completely motionless, as the papers were handed to his aide. For the first time since his infamous 2019 interview, he was truly speechless. All the denial, all the defiance, all the royal entitlement, all of it evaporated in that single moment. He had gambled that his brother's mercy would hold strong. Instead, Charles had written his final judgment in permanent ink. The news broke across news networks within minutes. BBC, Sky News, and every international outlet cut immediately to breaking news coverage. Anchors spoke in hushed, almost reverent tones. His Majesty King Charles has officially stripped Prince Andrew of his titles and ordered him to leave Royal Lodge immediately. Social media exploded in real time. The hashtag Royal Exile trended worldwide within an hour. In London pubs, morning commuters actually cheered. Outside Buckingham Palace, tourists stopped dead in their tracks to watch the headlines scroll across giant electronic screens. For once in a long time, the British public seemed completely united. Justice had finally arrived at the palace gates. Do you think this level of public celebration shows how serious the allegations against Andrew really were? Inside government circles, the reaction was diplomatic but definitely firm. Senior members of parliament, who had harshly criticized the Crown's previous silence over Andrew's lavish lifestyle, now praised the King's decisiveness. "This is real leadership," one Conservative minister said publicly. "The monarchy is finally aligning itself with public morality and modern values." Even opposition politicians, who are usually extremely wary about commenting on royal matters, admitted that Charles's move had restored some dignity to the crown. Meanwhile, the official statement issued by the palace at 6 p.m. was absolutely unflinching. His Majesty has today concluded the formal process of removing the styles, titles, and honors of Prince Andrew. In the interest of integrity and accountability, the Duke will no longer hold residence at Royal Lodge. The King and Queen extend their sympathies to the victims and survivors of all forms of abuse. That last line, short and surgical, struck the hardest. It wasn't just an announcement. It was a public moral verdict. The monarchy was cutting out the rot to preserve its very soul. As cameras crowded outside the gates, a black Range Rover with heavily tinted windows pulled away slowly, carrying Andrew's personal belongings. His face, glimpsed only briefly through the dark glass, was completely unreadable. A mixture of disbelief, humiliation, and something that looked like shock. He wasn't being arrested or put in handcuffs, but somehow the weight of public shame seemed heavier than any criminal sentence. Back in London, King Charles remained at Clarence House, meeting privately with his closest advisors. There were no celebrations, no champagne, no sense of triumph. Only a long, exhausted exhale of inevitability. "It's done," one aide whispered to another. "The institution can breathe again." But in the King's expression, witnesses said there was absolutely no satisfaction. This had been his brother, not just some random duke, and the personal cost of this cleansing was obviously enormous. What do you think it costs a person emotionally to publicly destroy their own sibling, even if it's for the greater good? By nightfall, Royal Lodge was completely sealed off. Workers began the process of inventorying all the furniture, antiques, and valuable paintings that belonged to the crown. Anything deemed personal to Andrew would be transferred to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate. His new residence, which was small, isolated, and deeply symbolic. It was the exact same cottage where Prince Philip had spent his quiet final years in dignified retirement. The irony was cruel, but absolutely deliberate. One Duke of Edinburgh had retired there with full honor and respect. Another would arrive in complete disgrace. In the hours that followed, speculation flared up again across social media and news channels. Would Charles apply this same strict standard to others teetering on the edge? Meghan and Harry's titles were already a hot topic of parliamentary debate. And what about Sarah Ferguson, who continued to style herself as the Duchess of York despite being divorced and facing her own controversies? The King offered absolutely no comment on any of it. Silence, once again, became his most powerful weapon. Is the King's silence about future decisions more frightening than any statement he could make? As the sun set over Windsor Great Park, floodlights suddenly illuminated the empty driveway of Royal Lodge. A symbol of former opulence now reduced to darkness and emptiness. The King's judgment was complete and final. History will remember October 30th, 2025, not as just another scandal, but as a true reckoning. A monarch had sacrificed his own brother to protect the monarchy itself from further damage. And for the first time in many years, the vast majority of British people actually approved. But the echoes of that earth-shattering decision would not fade away easily. Inside every single royal residence across the country, one haunting question began to whisper through the marble halls and gilded corridors. If even blood can be severed this easily, who among them is truly safe from the King's judgment? By the next morning, the entire monarchy had fundamentally changed. The removal trucks had left Windsor in the night. Royal Lodge stood completely silent and abandoned. The name Prince Andrew had vanished from the official royal website overnight, scrubbed clean as if he had never existed. Even the royal crest on his personal stationery, once proudly adorned with the Duke of York's official insignia, was completely gone. Within just a few hours, 70 years of carefully built royal identity had been erased as cleanly as a name wiped off a foggy window. Inside Buckingham Palace, the mood was deeply mixed. Relief mixed with quiet, uncomfortable unease. On one hand, the king's decisive action had been loudly applauded by both the general public and Parliament. Editorial columns praised his courage to protect the integrity of the crown at any cost. On the other hand, experienced courtiers whispered nervously about what might come next. "When you cut off one branch," said one worried palace aide, "you always risk shaking the entire tree." Across Britain, public reactions were as sharply divided as the nation itself has become. To many ordinary citizens, Andrew's dramatic downfall felt like justice that had been delayed far too long. A necessary cleansing of unearned privilege in a modern monarchy desperately trying to stay relevant in the 21st century. For others, it was a tragic but absolutely necessary sacrifice, a very public royal punishment that perfectly mirrored our times. Swift, public, and completely absolute. He's paying for more than just his own mistakes, one sharp observer wrote in the Guardian newspaper. He's paying for every single sin the crown has ever tried to hide from public view. The first days of Andrew's forced exile were marked by an uncomfortable silence. He was reportedly staying at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, the small, modest country home where his father, Prince Philip, had lived out his final years in peaceful retirement. Staff members there described an extremely muted atmosphere. Minimal visitors, curtains drawn tight against prying cameras, just the faint echo of television news playing somewhere in another room. One former servant said Andrew spent entire hours walking the grounds alone, his head down, absolutely refusing to speak to anyone who approached him. Can you imagine going from royal luxury to this kind of isolated existence practically overnight? Meanwhile, the public's fascination with the story didn't fade even slightly. News cameras lingered constantly near the gates of Sandringham, desperately hoping for even a glimpse of the disgraced Duke. Yet none came for days. A single photograph, taken from a considerable distance with a telephoto lens, showed Andrew standing alone at a window, watching raindrops slide slowly down the glass. It circulated across the internet, with one caption repeated thousands and thousands of times: "The man who thought he was completely untouchable." But inside the palace, attention was already shifting to what might happen next. Royal advisors warned King Charles very seriously that the public's growing appetite for accountability might not stop with just Andrew. Difficult questions about Harry and Meghan's royal titles resurfaced almost immediately, amplified by newspaper columnists who now framed the California couple as the next big test of royal consistency and fairness. Even Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife, suddenly faced renewed scrutiny for still using the Duchess of York title despite being divorced and dealing with her recent health controversies, though Charles absolutely refused to engage publicly on any of these questions. Insiders revealed a new guiding principle spreading rapidly through his household: reputation before relation. William and Catherine, meanwhile, maintained their usual composed dignity in all public appearances. But privately, aides said they felt an enormous sense of relief washing over them. The heavy burden of constantly defending the monarchy from Andrew's dark shadow had finally been lifted from their shoulders. This was the king's line in the sand, one experienced courtier remarked. He's saying very clearly to the next generation, protect the crown with everything you have, or lose it completely. Do you think this strict new standard will make the remaining royals more careful? Or will it create even more family division and resentment? Outside the United Kingdom, international reaction was equally sharp and divided. American news outlets compared the dramatic decision to a brutal corporate firing, a monarch acting like a tough CEO cleaning house. Across Europe, other royal houses issued very discreet, carefully worded statements of support, praising Charles's firm resolve. Yet some royal experts wondered aloud whether this purge had come far too late to truly repair the institution's badly damaged global image. The monarchy has survived this crisis, said one respected historian. But it's noticeably smaller now, much harder, and definitely colder than before. As for Andrew himself, Sources who remain close to him described a deeply broken man oscillating wildly between bitter resentment and crushing despair. He still firmly denies every single accusation made against him. He still insists loudly that he is simply a victim of cold political necessity and public hysteria. But his world has grown unbelievably small. A man once constantly surrounded by fawning courtiers and flashing cameras now lives in quiet, lonely exile, watched only by the crows of rural Norfolk and occasional curious tourists. And in that heavy silence, the one question the king most desperately wanted to suppress absolutely refuses to die. When the crown begins actively purging its own family members, how long before it inevitably turns its harsh, judging gaze elsewhere? Who do you think might be next on the king's list if he continues this pattern? The image that will permanently stay in Britain's collective national memory is not the grand, imposing facade of Buckingham Palace, nor even the royal crest being stripped from thousands of official documents. It's something much quieter and more haunting. A single dim light glowing in a window at Sandringham, where Andrew Mountbatten Windsor now spends his long, lonely evenings in complete isolation. No servants bustling efficiently through long corridors anymore. No proud banners of honor fluttering impressively above the gates. Just one man who once perfectly embodied unearned privilege, now living among painful echoes of what used to be his reality. Across virtually all the press coverage, the tone was nearly unanimous in its verdict. The Times of London called it a necessary act of mercy through strict accountability. The Guardian labeled it boldly the monarchy's genuine first step into moral modernity. Even the Washington Post in the United States ran a striking headline that read, "King Charles reclaims the crown's conscience." American late-night comedy hosts quickly turned it all into biting satire, while serious British political pundits debated endlessly whether the monarchy had finally found its backbone, or simply found its next convenient scapegoat. But one thing became absolutely crystal clear to everyone watching. The long era of silent indulgence within the royal family was completely and permanently over. Major political voices soon joined the growing chorus of commentary. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, standing formally before Parliament, praised the king's decisive resolve. There comes a critical point where true leadership demands real sacrifice, even of one's own flesh and blood. From across the Atlantic Ocean, President Donald Trump, never one to be shy about royal commentary, quipped characteristically on social media, "Tough guy move from Charles. I respect that tremendously. Family or not, you absolutely protect the brand." The stark contrast between diplomatic language and Trump's trademark bluntness somehow made perfect sense in the complex. Contradictory age we're all living in right now. What does it say about our modern world when a president and a king both agree that reputation matters more than family loyalty? And yet, beyond all the media spectacle and political commentary, lies a much deeper, more universal story about personal responsibility, one that stretches far beyond palaces, politics, or inherited privilege. Because at its absolute core, this shocking saga isn't just about Andrew losing some fancy titles and a big house. It's really about what inevitably happens when stubborn denial finally meets unavoidable consequence. When unchecked power completely forgets basic humility. When personal reputation becomes a valuable currency that even mighty kings can't afford to carelessly squander. In our modern world where public image rules faster than actual truth can spread, Andrew's spectacular downfall serves as a stark reminder that accountability will eventually knock loudly on every single door, even the most elaborately gilded ones protected by centuries of tradition. His dramatic fall from grace isn't just juicy royal gossip to entertain us. It's actually a clear mirror for absolutely anyone who's ever mistakenly believed their worst mistakes could stay permanently hidden behind wealth, status, or a famous family name. Whether you wear an actual crown on your head, or simply carry a basic name badge to work every day, the fundamental lesson remains exactly the same. True character is the one title that absolutely cannot be inherited from your parents or bought with money. It has to be earned fresh every single day through your choices and actions. King Charles's painful decision may divide public opinions sharply, but history will most likely remember it as the precise moment when the British monarchy finally stopped running away from its own dark shadows. A grieving father may have wanted to forgive, but a responsible king had to act decisively. And maybe that's the true, terrible cost of real leadership. Having to carefully balance human compassion with cold justice. even when the crushing weight of family blood makes it feel completely unbearable. Is there anything more difficult than having to publicly punish someone you grew up with and still love? As all of Britain watches the heavy iron gates of Royal Lodge close permanently behind the disgraced Duke, La Weiss, Wobus, Vesti, Wheat, one simply can't help but wonder deeply, is this really the genuine rebirth of a cleaner, more ethical monarchy? Or is it just another carefully staged chapter in the institution's endless cycle of reinvention and survival? Only time, and inevitably the next royal scandal, will ultimately tell us the truth. And now I'm turning this conversation directly over to you, because your voice and perspective truly matter here. Do you honestly believe King Charles made the absolutely right choice in this impossible situation? Or has the ancient monarchy gone way too far in so harshly punishing one of its own family members? I genuinely want to know what you're thinking right now. Please tell me your honest thoughts in the comments section below, and make sure to mention the specific country or city you're watching this video from. It's absolutely fascinating to see how people from all around the world interpret this exact same royal story through completely different cultural lenses and personal experiences. If this detailed report made you think deeply about power and accountability, if it stirred something meaningful inside you about justice and family, please don't forget to hit that like button right now. Share this video with a friend or family member who loves following royal news and drama. And definitely subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications to stay with us for the next chapter of this unfolding story. Because the palace never truly sleeps, and neither does the drama that surrounds it. The crown always casts shadows, but now those shadows are growing longer and darker than ever before. Will Charles continue cutting away anyone who threatens the monarchy's reputation? Will Harry and Meghan face similar consequences? Will the British public continue supporting this new, harsher version of royal justice? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over, and what happens next could change the royal family forever. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue following every twist and turn of this historic moment.